one of them doctors got caught out there in Newark, and the cop whooped his head till it roped like okra. Then he started talking about we and us. they said that we are black. They established the fact that, we will not be recognized as Negroes, we are black. The man said, wow, Jim, okay. He said, we'll concede that. We concede blackness to you. But we will not concede revolutionary struggle. We will not concede revolutionary nationalism. We'll concede blackness because then he still can sell that program about, like, just new faces. That's all, a new color. You have to understand that the job is to seize that and to make the world more humane. That has to be the role of any revolutionary, or any person who considers himself revolutionary.
Do you feel that black people will ever have a strong political voice in this country in the formal sense as we understand it? You mentioned that you don't think that this could ever come about. Is there any chance that it might?
No, see, I think that's a reformist, position to assume for me to say that black people will one day occupy in this system political offices of importance. Now, this brings on a whole discussion of control, you see, and how you control. Because anything that you don't control is used as a weapon against you. Now, in terms of black people occupying positions, America has created in Cleveland, Washington, D.C., and Gary, Indiana, a type of neo-colonialism. In other words, the man has set up a puppet regime. These black people are responsive to the needs and the whims of the Democratic Party and not of the masses of black people. If Johnson is president or whoever is president were to tell Stokes or Hatcher or Walter Washington to send black people to concentration camps, then there would be no discussion, because they would see it as their job, because they hold a position that's, responsive or that's sensitive to the Democratic Party.
Do you view those that are in prominent positions that are black sort of a token gesture on the part of the establishment, like a member of the Supreme Court bench that was a black member of the cabinet, and so forth?
I think that has to be examined in the sense of progress and as to whether black people have made progress in this country. My contention is that black people have not made progress in this country. America has given blacks some concessions out of political necessity, bad political necessity. They gave Thurgood Marshall a position on the Supreme Court to appease black people. In other words, we didn't put Thurgood Marshall there. They can take Thurgood Marshall whenever they get ready. We put Adam in office. They took Adam out. They gave black people an astronaut, and they killed him. So what happens is that has to be viewed in the light of concessions. The very fact that the man can concede a position to you tells you that you do not have a position of power where you can demand or that you can mandate something.
How do you think that the press has affected the black situation in this country?
I think news media and media in general are very negative in terms of any revolutionary movement or any movement that, forces the change of the status quo. Now, media has always been an enemy of black people, because what media has done is media has always singled out people who had vanguard positions or vanguard attitudes and tried to make these people an enemy of the masses of people. In our case, make individuals enemies of black people. Malcolm X would be a good example. More Negroes feared Malcolm X than white people, because news media told black people that Malcolm was bad. Muhammad Ali, the reason that Muhammad Ali could be given the maximum sentence and the maximum fine and the black community did not revolt was because Muhammad Ali had been made an enemy of black people. Adam Clayton Powell could be legally lynched, politically lynched, and black people did not revolt. It was because the man had told black people that Adam Clayton Powell was an uppity nigger. He had legitimatized his own action through news media. So the news media is a tool of oppression.
What about your personal experience with the press? Do you feel that the press has given you a fair shake?
You see, in terms of myself as an individual, whether I get coverage or not, doesn't make any difference. But in terms of ideas, in terms of the flux of ideas, or the flow of ideas,
all right,
I see that, I see that the press has deliberately created a vacuum in terms of deliverance of attitudes or positions to the black community, which is to be expected. We cannot rely upon white news media to convey black revolutionary messages. So, the press is doing their job. And to me, what happened to me last year with the press was that there was a boycott against me, ABC, NBC, and CBS. Anything that Rap Brown did, you blacked out. Because, just like that, no question about it. And this was the whole attitude that has been assumed by news media. And black people do not control news media, so they cannot expect to turn on TV and find out what's going on in the black community. Just like, for example, in New York Times, one of the biggest pieces of white nationalism that exists in the country.